London is back where we thought it was 60 years ago. In 1952, there were over 4,000 deaths due to short-term exposure to visible air pollution. We only found out 10 years ago that the health impact of long-term exposure to air pollution dwarfs that from short-term exposure. The Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, calculated that there were 4,300 early deaths due to long-term exposure to invisible air pollution in 2008 alone. We're back where we started.
We're at the Marylebone Road monitoring station at the roadside in central London. This tells us about people's exposure close to the road in central London. Pollution comes from a number of sources. An urban background location, it comes from traffic and from domestic heating and from industry. As you get close to the road, more and more of it is dominated by emissions from vehicles.
Road transport is responsible for about 80% of the most harmful emissions in London. Diesel pollution is a particular problem. Diesel vehicles produce, for example, something like 20 times as many of the dangerous particles as petrol vehicles. And we need to tackle these problems, which focus on the larger vehicles, on taxis, on buses, but also on private cars.
The modern engines produce particles which are very, very small indeed. I mean, much, much smaller than a human hair, so you can't see them. The issue is that they seem to be coated with complex chemicals, metals and organic compounds, and these are carried deep into our lung. So this is really a new challenge for mankind. We didn't have these type of particles before. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that there's just so many of them. I mean, in London, you know, on a poor air quality day, we're exceeding the European guidelines for particulate pollution and for some of the gaseous pollutants. And we know from studies that we've done in animals and in man, in chamber studies, that exposure to these particles leads to health effects.
I've been jogging in London for about approximately 10 years, and I find that running through the pollution really is starting to get to my lungs. I'm coughing and wheezing a little bit. It's very subtle, and obviously you can't see the pollution, but I really find that it's actually affecting me.
If you get stuck behind a bus or a big double-decker bus, you can really kind of feel the air pollution because you're kind of breathing in all this smoke. But actually, like, even when you don't notice it, even when you feel like you're not sort of right in the exhaust fumes, there's still so much in the air, and you can feel it like in your lungs and when you wash your face and your hands in the evening.
I'm here on Upper Thames Street and I'm going to do a pollution check, and what this particle counter does is tell me how many of the tiny particles there are in the air. If I turn this on, you can see that there are over 200 million of the tiniest particles, and those are the ones that go deepest into the lungs and into the bloodstream. The particle levels that I'm seeing here today are some of the highest I've ever seen. We've still had no smog alert from the mayor or the government, and that needs to change, and it needs to change now. What we need to do is tackle harmful emissions at their source, not try and offset them afterwards as they float around in the air between the road and people. The mayor's approach of offsetting pollution once it's floating around in the air is no more than greenwash. These pot plants using dust suppressants in the near side lane, and worse still by the official monitors which tell us what pollution is an absolute disgrace.
Worst case scenario is that pollution doesn't improve. We have had a lot of trouble over the last decade making any real indents on air quality in London, even though a lot has been done. So we're going to have to do a lot more and cut a lot deeper into transport emissions if we're going to achieve the result that we need to give every Londoner and everybody that visits London good air quality.
As Mayor, I would make cleaning up London's dirty air a top priority from day one. We must have a city where we can save lives, where people can breathe easily, where people can actually live a good quality of life. And I would do that by making sure that we have a clean bus fleet, that we have a clean taxi fleet, and if it means finding a fund to help taxi drivers upgrade, then that's what we'll do. And I'll create a very low emission zone in the centre of London and in the Heathrow area so that dirty vehicles can't move around. And finally, I'll campaign to stop all airport expansion and to close City Airport. Let's make London a greener place.